Hello, today is the anniversary of the birth in 1782 of Bertrand Russell, a well-known mathematician, philosopher, academic, but someone who, in the 20th century, when radio began to develop and later television, he was often somebody who was called upon to give his views on whatever was the current issue of the day, because he was seen to be a very wise person. And I am interested particularly today in his pacifist views. He was a pacifist at the start of his life, but during the course of the 20th century, he had to adapt and compromise his views in response to what was going on. Initially, he was able to be pretty definite. He was against the First World War, spoke out against it, was imprisoned for doing so. In between the wars, with the growth of Hitler, he applied his pacifist views to the situation, saying that in one speech that if Hitler did invade, we should embrace the invaders and try and work with them and persuade them round to a different point of view. But as the war developed and it became clear what Hitler was doing, he realised that was impractical and compromised his views again to accept the Second World War was inevitable. After the Second War, with the growth of the communist threat in Russia, as it was seen at the time, he compromised his views so far as to say that he thought probably the best thing was to use America's superior military power to deal with Russia militarily before it got so strong that it threatened democracy, because alongside pacifism was a passionate belief in the freedom of the human being against authoritarian government. But when Russia developed the nuclear weapon, that clearly became impossible. And so he spent the rest of his career working for nuclear disarmament, trying to persuade those countries that had weapons of destruction to destroy them and to stop any further development of them. I'm just intrigued by the way in which idealism, in Bertrand Russell's case, constantly has to be tempered to the concrete situation, and often compromises have to be made. And I think this is true of all of us. I hope we're all idealists. I hope we all want a peaceful world, a world where every human being is respected, where human beings are free. But sometimes we have to compromise our idealism in order that those ideals can be protected in the long term. The war in Ukraine is one example. None of us want that war, and yet we see, most of us, that it has to happen in order that authoritarian government and unwarranted attack on sovereign states should be prevented. I think there's a case sometimes we feel we have to compromise. We have an ideal that we want a world which is working towards the end of anything which pollutes the environment and creates climate change. And yet we go on buying things in shops that are in plastic wrapping that won't be recyclable. We're constantly compromised in that ideal. Or if we're out in the city and we see somebody on the street asking for money, ideally we'd love to give them some because we want to help everybody, and yet sometimes we feel that it doesn't feel that it would be the right thing to do for various reasons. I think we're always having to compromise our ideals, and all I think to say to myself today is, don't let that lead me into despair and to give up on them. Go on being idealistic, even if sometimes, in order to achieve the ends that we all want, sometimes the means are less than ideal.